Hello. Hello and welcome to this developer talk, Develop an App with the Odoo framework. My name is Yannick Tivis and today I want to show you how to implement a module, here a plant nursery module, in only a few minutes. To briefly present myself, I've started working at Odoo 5 years ago as a product owner. And now I am the guru of a team of 6 persons in which we are developing new features and improving existing ones on all the human resources applications. This presentation is the first one of several training talks for developers about the Odoo framework. There is another one about the mixins presented by Thibaut de la Vallée. Briefly, a mixin is a transversal feature that is extracted into a specific model that we name an abstract model, and this mixin can be inherited on your own models to inherit this powerful feature quite easily. So if you wish to discover these nice features like the chatter or the rating mixins, you can go to the room Foyer du Lac on Friday at 11:40 a.m. And during the last talk, Nicolas Bayet will present you the front-end development, the website integrations, and the CMS. So if you, at the end of this talk, you should be able to expose data on the front-end while ensuring the security of your personal information. Okay. And you should also be able to modify your website to make it beautiful and in accordance with your brand and your philosophy, for example. Rather than diving straight into the technical part of the talk, we will begin with a small introduction of the features we will develop together and the Odoo architecture. That's right, during this talk we will build together our own plant nursery module, step by step, to discover the basic of the specificities of the Odoo framework. For example, we will discover the general structure of a module. It means where should we define the business models, the data, and so on. And we will discover how to define complex views to add relation between those models, how to interact with the database using the ORM, and I have prepared some other cool stuff to show you if we still have some time. And at the end of the presentation, for sure, I will answer to all the questions you could have. Okay, let's start with the feature. As I said, the goal of the presentation is to build a module to manage a plant nursery. So this will be a standalone application. Standalone means that this application can be used only by using the Odoo framework. And the goal is to show you that it is possible to build a fully functional module in a few minutes all by yourself. In this module, we intend to manage the basic flows on the plant nursery, which are managing different plants, sell them, and manage customers. The methodology that I will use today is the following. I'm gonna show you different elements of the Odoo framework, and then step by step I will add some chunks of code by doing an interactive rebase on an existing branch, and I will show you the result visually. Okay. The slides of the presentation and the code I developed for this presentation are available on my GitHub account, and I will give you all the references at the end of the presentation. And each feature is separated by a different fully functional commit, so if you want to try this at home, you can clone the repository and play with it on your own computer. Okay, here is our friend, Classical Dev. What does he say? He says, I don't always implement a plant nursery module, but when I do, I use Odoo. Thanks, Classical Dev, but how could you be so sure that Odoo is a perfect choice for this? First, let's talk about the architecture of a complex system like Odoo. A three-tier architecture is a client-server architecture in which, one, we have the user interface, which is generally called the presentation layer. We have the functional process logic, or the application layer, and the computer data storage and data access that are developed to maintain the system. And those three elements are independent modules often on separate platforms. Okay, and generally in web development, in the web development field, like Odoo, the three tiers are the following: one, a front-end web server. It's basically the content rendered by the browser. Two, middle dynamic content. For example, we often heard about Symfony, Spring, ASP.NET, Django, etc. And three, backend database or data store comprising both the data sets, so the elements in the database, and it will allow to manage and provide access to the data you have. What is the front-end web server? The web client in Odoo is written in JavaScript, and additional templates can be defined in HTML5, and the design rules can be defined by using CSS. Secondly, the middle server. The server and the backend modules are written in Python 3 since the 11th version, and before it was Python 2. And finally, what is the backend database? At Odoo, the database is PostgreSQL. It's a free and an open source relational database management system, and it's designed to handle a large workload, okay, and several web services with concurrent users. So it's a perfect choice for our needs at Odoo. And why Postgres and not another? It's just historical, because at the time Odoo was still tiny ERP, it was the only open source transactional database available on the market, and reliable enough to use it in a professional context. Okay, as I said, the web client is written in JavaScript and has its own internal framework maintained by a specific team in the R&D department. When you render data, for example, on the customer form view, the web client will make an asynchronous HTTP call to the server and will display the result on the screen. And in fact, all the actions made by the web client are always done by making asynchronous HTTP call to the server. The web framework offers also all the tools to create a new relational field, a new view, or a new widget quite easily, without having to care about the object initialization, the rendering, the attachment to the page, and the destroying of the object, and the end of its life. And as I've already said, the server is written in Python 3, so you should also know that the modules are written following a MVC framework. The MVC framework is one of the most frequently used in the web development industry to create a scalable and an extensible project. And in fact, MVC stands for models, views, and controllers. The model corresponds to all the data-related logic that the user works with. For example, a customer object will retrieve the customer information from the database, manipulates it, and updates the data back to the database, or use it to render the information on the interface. The view components is used for all the UI logic of the applications. For example, the customer view will include all the UI components, such as the text boxes, the drop-downs, etc., that the final user interacts with. And the controllers act as an interface between the models and the view components to process all the business logic and the incoming request. Okay. Second specificity of the backend server, it's the ORM, short for Object Relational Mapping, and it's a central part in Odoo. The data model in the code is described and manipulated through Python classes and objects, and it is the ORM job to bridge the gap as transparently as possible for the developer between the Python declarations and the PostgreSQL database, which will provide the persistence we need to use a system like Odoo. I will make a simple example to show you the power of the ORM. Let's say that I define a new model, my awesome character, here. which is a model that has a name field, which is required, and a best friend field that should also be an awesome character. Okay, you can see that all the business object definition is holding into 4 lines. But what happens when you install the modules containing this model definition? The ORM, by the syntax we used to define the models, will deduct that there is a new table to create first, with the name my_awesome_character, with a varchar colon here for the name that should have a not null constraint, and a friend colon which should be an integer with a foreign key constraint on the same table. Okay, so and it is exactly what the ORM does when you install the module. If you inspect the table that was created, you see the table here and several fields that I defined, name and friends, and other magic fields. There is the ID, which is in an auto-incremented primary key. The name, a varchar, which has a not null constraint as defined on the model. The friend, which is an integer here, with a foreign key here, pointing to the myAwesome character fields, and the create UID and write UID fields, which represent the user who created or edited the record, with the foreign key to the rest users tables, and the create date and write date fields that are timestamp columns. So you can see that it is quite easy to define a new model that is correctly configured on the database without having to write a single line of SQL. Okay. So what are the pros of using a ORM? First, you get to write in the language you are already using anyway. So if we are being honest, we probably aren't the greatest at writing SQL requests. SQL is ridiculously a powerful language, but most of us don't write it so often. So we do, however, tend to be much more fluent in one language that we know, like Python, and it's a good point for using an ORM. It abstracts also the database system, so if we want to switch from PostgreSQL to another database like MySQL, it shouldn't be a huge challenge. Another point is that depending on the ORM, you get a lot of advanced features like a cache mechanism or a security layer that we will see together afterward for the case of Odoo. And finally, many of the queries you write will perform better than if you wrote them yourself, generally. And what could be the cons of using these kind of things? If you are a master at SQL, you can probably get more performant queries by writing them yourself, especially for heavy queries on a lot of tables. There is an overhead involved in learning how to use any given ORM, so the training could be a little reluctant for newbies. And the initial configuration of an ORM can be a headache, but it's hopefully not the case for Odoo. And as a developer, it's important to understand what is happening under the hood. So since we use ORM, sometimes it can make you a weaker developer for this portion of the task. Okay. So now that we know all this about the Odoo architecture, let's talk about the feature itself. To manage a plant nursery, I should be able to have a list of the plants I sell. I should be able to manage orders, and I also should be able to keep track of my customers. Functionally, we will only cover these 3 points, but when it's done, it means that your module should be sufficient to manage a basic shop, okay? So in only an hour of development. And on the other hand, technically, we need to know the structure of a new module, we need to know how to define data, and we need to know how to define views and menu items to display this information on the screen. So, what is the global structure of any module in Odoo? In Odoo, everything is modular. So you could define a sales module to manage the sales order and a website modules to manage your website and the design. So nothing prevents you to create a new e-commerce module to allow external people to buy something from your website. It's already the case, but it's an example. It means that your e-commerce module can depend on both sales and website modules and reuse the existing feature in a few lines of code. That's the reason why we decided that a module is simply a folder in which we have files, and this folder should be contained in the add-ons path used by the server. An Odoo module should always have a manifest file. This is a Python file containing a dictionary with all the global information of the module. Some Python files containing all the models definition and the logic of the application. Some data files, generally in XML and CSV, that contains all the static information of the modules, like the base data, the demo data, the views definition, the actions, or the menu items. And sometimes framework or front-end resources, generally JavaScript or CSS files that contains the UI components definition and the styling rules that you will use. Okay, so the manifest is always called manifest.py. With the init.py files, it's the minimum required files for your Odoo modules to be installable. As I said, the global information of the module are defined in it, like the version number, the category of the module, a summary of what it does, and so on. You also have to define the module dependencies in it, here. As we have a modular approach in Odoo, here we only depend on the web module. Web module will install the basic module with the kernel logic and the web client. You can define the path to all the data files that should be imported here. And you can also define the path to the demo data files to load or additional resources like the QWeb, like the dynamic templates in QWeb to define the UI components used by the web client. You can also specify if the module can be installed, should be installed automatically if the dependencies are met, and also define if your module is a main application or a small module like a bridge, for example, the e-commerce module that I said before. Now, to describe the models, we should do it in a Python file. The file name does not matter, but you have to import it in the init.py file. Usually, we put one model per file to ease the code reading. You can check our coding guidelines in the official documentation. You can type on Google, it's easy to find. You have to define a class for each model. So a class here, a class here. The class name does not matter, but the underscore name attribute matters. We don't use the Python class to refer the model, unlike Django, for example. We will use the underscore name for the reference or the inheritance. And note that there is also an underscore description attribute that you can define to provide a user-friendly model descriptor for end users. As I did for the example with my awesome character, in your class you can define all the fields you need. For example, the plant name, which is a char field too, or the price, which is a float field. And if you want more information about the different existing fields in Odoo, you can check the official documentation page over here. When you install or update the modules, as I said, the ORM will create the database tables, the constraint, and so on. So you don't have to write SQL, and this is one of the main powers of Odoo. Now that we have defined the models, we should also define security access rules. Remember that if you don't do it, you will never be able to access your documents because it's not you didn't allow users to access them. According to the coding guidelines, model access rules are always defined in CSV files and imported in the manifest. Here we define one rule for each model. So the model nursery plant and nursery customer. And we write to read, to write, to create, and to unlink a record to the group user, which is here. The group user is the internal user group. So mainly it's the employees of the company. Second group that you could use, for example, is the portal users. These are the users with a login and a password, but no access to the backend resources, only the resource that you allow on the website. For example, a portal user could have access to his own sales orders or the help desk tickets he opened, and so on. And the last user type is the public user. It's the user by default when you are not logged in on Odoo. So imagine you have a simple visitor on the e-commerce. It will use the public user in that case. Now that the models and the logic is defined in Python, and now that we have the security defined as the static CSV file, we have to define the remaining static data in XML. And as you see here, we define three things. An action to access the model. Note that IR actions act window is a model as well as nursery plant, for example. So we define an action that should display all the nursery plant in a list view here. And we also link a form view. It means that if you click on one element of the list view, it should open the related form view to edit the record. The second element is a root menu item here. In Odoo, you know that there is a app switcher that we call the home screen, for example, in which all the main applications are displayed. By defining a root menu item, understand an item without parent. Here you see there is a parent. The application should the application should have its own dedicated icon here. And the third element is the menu item to display the plans, and its parent is obviously the root menu item. And this menu is linked to the action we defined just before, the action here. Okay, so when clicking on this menu item, it will trigger the related action, which is to display the list of the plans. That way, the way to create a record in the database is always by using the tag record over here, as for the action. But there are also syntactic sugar in Odoo, like this tag, menu item. It's a shortcut to create a menu with the model IR UI menu. Okay, it's just a shortcut. So now I'm going to show you the result of the first module definition. You may wonder what is going to be displayed on the list view and the form view, as we didn't define it. But in fact, Odoo is able to generate automatically a view if you don't specify it at the first time. So I have here the first commit, which is the new plant management module. As I showed you before, is just visible over here, and I can install it and it will work. But as I only have defined a module, I have nothing here, okay? So I'm gonna apply the following. The first things that I had is the definitions of the models, okay? So as you see, there is a class customer and there is a class plans, okay? I should also add the security over here. So two rules to provide access to my two models. And the last thing that I should add is the views and the action definition, okay? So now I should have everything in hand to install my module. Here I'm gonna update it by hand instead of going on the interface to do it. You see that my files here are loaded. You see that now I should have a menu item to access my application here. And I have two menus, plans and customer. I can create a plant, for example, Amaryllis, and a price of 7. And it's done. Everything is working. And if you want me to show you the database, first, for example, Nursery. The module is Nursery plant. You see that my table is initialized, and there is the correct fields definition on it. And if I want to see what's inside my table, there is a typo. You see that the record I just created is over here, and the ORM just added itself on the database. So you see that I've already something to manage my plans, and I have not written a single line of SQL, for example. Okay. Now we are going to see how we could define the specific view for a given model, because even if the list view and the form view that we saw is working, it's not always what you want, because most of the time you need to organize the information. Here we only have 2 fields, but you could have 30, 40, 50 fields on the same form view. Okay, so now we want to define a beautiful form view for my plans. We have to create a new static data for the view. The model of a view is IR UI view here. A view is defined by its name, and it's model specific, so you have to specify the model on which it will be applied. And the architecture of the view should be defined as XML here. Okay. First, we define the type of the view. Here we set it as a form view by using the form tag, and we could also use the tree tag for a list, the search tag for a search view, Kanban, and so on. By using a tag field here on the view, it means that you will display the field and the label of the field. A classic Odoo view is split into 4 columns, so adding a group tag over here allows to group the children elements together, but also takes 2 columns for the children. So it means that if you put a field into a group, you use one line, entirely one line in the group, because the 2 columns are used to display 1 the label and 2 the fields. And the H1 tag here is a classic head title in HTML. There is also the notebook here that will display a notebook on the view, and each defined page will be a tab to display more elements. So let's check the result. Yep. So here I just add only my view. And if I refresh the page, you see that now my view is displayed in a better way, and that I can organize my information as I wish. Now that we have defined a model for the plans and a model for the customer, we should also define the last model, the orders, to put these 2 first models in relation. Okay. What are the different relations? Here. What are the different relations between models in Odoo? The many-to-one is like foreign key in Django. It's a simple link to another object. For example, on the plant order, the customer field should be a many-to-one to a nursery customer. The one-to-many field is the inverse relation. So this is a virtual relationship inverse of a many-to-one. So a one-to-many behaves as a container of records. For example, you have an order and the order lines. So when you access to a one-to-many field, you get a set of records that could be possibly empty. And you should be careful, because the one-to-many is a virtual relationship. There must be a many-to-one field on the other model to make the closure, and the name of the field must match the definition of the one-to-many definition. An example of a one-to-many, as I said, could be the line orders, the order line, sorry. if we want to have more than one ordered plant on each order. But we won't do it at the first time. We will keep it simple and improve it afterward. And the many-to-many relation is a bidirectional multiple relationship. Any record on one side can be related to any number of records on the other side. It also behaves as a container of records, like the one-to-many. So if you access to a many-to-many field, you could possibly get a set of records that could be empty. So you have to check those cases to avoid tracebacks. And when you create a many-to-many fields, you create an intermediate join table with two columns to match the IDs of the elements. Okay. So if you say that a product can be linked to several categories, you will have the first column which will be product ID. The product 5 is linked to the category 7 and 9, for example. Okay. Now retrieve all the orders that were made for this particular plant. So, as I said, the one-to-many field is a virtual relation, so it means that there is no impact on the database. There will be no column on the database. Okay, let's see the result. So here, I just add my relation here. I've also added the security rules to allow the object and the views and the actions to have the menu. Okay. Now I can update the form, and you see that I have a new menu item order here. I can create an order to say about 2 plants. You see that the name here is a little ugly, and we will see afterward how to improve it. And if I go on the plant, on my second tab, I've added 2 on the form. You see that I have 2 orders which are related to this plant. Okay. Now that we know how to make some models interact with each other, how could we use the ORM in order to interact with the database? So here we are just defining models and creating records. But how could we make these elements interact with each other? You already know that the ORM updates and creates the related Postgres table when you install the module. And it also provides basic methods to interact with the database. For example, to read a record, you can use the browse method. It returns a record set for the IDs you provided in the parameters. And if you want to access to a field for this record set, you can use the .field notation to retrieve the field value, for example, plant.price. To write on a record, you can use the write method that takes a dictionary with the field's name as key and the values as a value. You wish to write on the record. To create a new record, you can use the create method. It's the same thing that's write. It takes a dictionary field. To delete a record, you can use the unlink method. Sometimes it won't be possible if the records are referenced elsewhere. So if you want to, I don't know, unlink a partner, but you already have an invoice that references it, sometimes we will say, no, don't remove this partner because it's important on the database. To search record based on certain criteria, you can use the search method. So it takes a domain as argument and will return all the records of this model that match the given domain, the conditions you gave. You can use additional parameters to limit the amount of returned results, for example. So for all the methods that the ORM provides, be aware that the security access rules are evaluated by it. So the search method will only return the documents that you can in fact access. The write method will return in an error if you want to write on a record you couldn't access, for example. So it's another power of the ORM. You don't have to check the security access rights at every place you try to retrieve data or modify them. So you can simply rely on the security rules that you define, and it's a great thing. Another advantage of is the implementation of the cache. Let's say that you are iterating on the orders to make the sum of all the orders, all the plants you sold. Okay, when you access to the order of the amount of the first order, so you will make a loop on all the orders, and for the first order, when you try to access to the price, it's highly probable that you are gonna do the same for all the records in the dataset. So in that case, what happened? In that case, the ORM will request to the database the value for the records you have, but will also request the value for all the records on the database in a single request. And it will put the result in the cache. That way, when you access to the field value on the second loop, you don't have to access to the database again because the result is already here, and it allows much better performances and less access to the database, so reducing also the risk of concurrent access error. Okay, now let's improve the nursery order module to use some of the features provided by the ORM. I have added a name field to avoid the record to be displayed as nursery order. Before it was displayed nursery order, comma 1, for example. So by default, the name of the order will be the creation date. I've added a state field, which is a selection field. An order could be draft if it's still a quotation, confirmed once the order is validated, and or cancelled. And here we set a default value to draft, so every new order will be draft by default. And I've added also a last modification field, which is a datetime field. So how to use the methods we saw to modify it? In this example, we override the write method to customize the behavior of the original one. So when we write on a record, we will modify the values dictionary here, and we will set that the new value for last modification is now. If you remember at the beginning on the magic fields, there is a field write date, which is the last edition date. So basically, it's the same behavior that we are implementing here, but it's an example. On the second example, we override the unlink method to customize it, and we want to prevent a user to delete a record that is already confirmed. So if the order is already done, don't remove it from the database. Self can contain one or multiple records, so you need to iterate on them. Otherwise, you will crash directly if you call it on several records. And on a browse record here, you can use the basic operations to add records, modify a value, etc. Now we have to define the form view of a nursery order to display the fields. So it's the same thing that before. And let's see the result. Yep. So here, what did I have? Okay. So now I'm updating the module. Here I have an order. I can modify the state, and if I modify the state, you will see that the last modification date will be updated because I have called the method write. Okay, so you see that it worked. And now that the order is confirmed, if I try to delete it, what happened? Are you sure? And then you cannot delete confirmed order. So that's the behavior that I wanted and that I implemented. And you see that now also the name of the order is the creation date and not the ugly name that we had before. Okay. Here is classical dev again. I don't always implement an Odoo module, but when I do, I add some classical features. So here, basically, you have seen all the basic information that I wanted to show you, but now we will see advanced features and see what we can do to go further. So thanks classical dev. What else could you show us? For example, the computed fields. some fields can be defined to be computed. It means that their value is the result of a computation. So when we do this, it is because the value is complex and it needs to be processed. Okay? For example, we could count the number of orders that sells a specific plant. We have to define the trigger for the recomputation. For that, we specify which fields are useful to compute them. And by default, a computed field is not stored on the database, but sometimes we could want to do it, for example, to be able to search on it. So a computed field that is stored is faster to read, but as you have to store the value each time you modify the records, it is slower on updates. Okay? So let's take our example to have the computed field order count. The field will be stored, computed by the method compute order count, and will be recomputed each time the field order IDs, so the one-to-many field, is modified. Okay. We can also define a constraint on the model. These constraints are evaluated at each record creation or modification for this model. And if the constraint is not met, this will result into an error, preventing the user to make the action. And it could be useful to define a constraint instead of overriding the create and the write method to enforce this behavior in case someone does special things. Okay, so to define a constraint, here we had a field number in stock. And we will say that if the number of orders exceed the number in stock, we will return an error. There is only 6 in stock, but 7 are sold. Here we have to define the triggers too. So the order count, the number of orders I made, and the number in stock. And we will say for each plant, if the number in stock is set and if the order count is greater than number in stock, I raise the error. Maybe I could show those two things. So the first one was the computed field, I think. So on the plant, I should be able to see that I have sold two plants. So the computed field is correct. And if I say, okay, I have only 2 in stock, I shouldn't be able to sell a third one. And let's try to do it. When I save, the error is correctly raised. Okay. I can also show you how to define a Kanban view. It's to display the information in a tile, and it could also add we could also add a picture on the plan to display it. The Kanban view can be useful to have an aggregated view to visualize the sales flow. So we also need to define a search view to group the data. So first, we add an image here, which is a binary field. On the order action, I enable the Kanban view. The Kanban view is declared over here. So instead of a form tag, we use the Kanban tag, and the template is rendered dynamically for each record. So the syntax may be a little different, but it's not a big challenge to understand it. And you can reuse some existing CSS classes, like Kanban record title, for example, and so on. So here we mainly display the image for the field, for the plant, the name, and the price. So let's see the result. So it's for a plant. So you see that I have the Kanban view over here, and I can edit the image, and it's working quite easily. Okay. I've also defined a Kanban view for the order. Is it already there? No. But there is an issue with the Kanban view for the orders. It's that there is a state, and if you look at it, we don't see it. We don't see this information, and it could be nice to see the whole flow for the sales order. So first I have to define the search view to group the state. The search view is defined in the same way than the form view and the form view or the Kanban view, so except that we use the search tag here. And we define three things. The first one is fields, to be able to search on the field value. For example, we could be able to search on the plant name, the customer name, or the state. After, we can add filters to filter in the search, like here, for all the confirmed orders. And we can add group by filters to aggregate the record according to the field value. And that's what is interesting just right now. We also have to modify the state field to add this attribute, group expand. What does it mean? If I group by state, I will display all the records for this specific state. But if there is no cancelled order, for example, I have no records to display for this state, and the column won't be displayed. So if you have a big flow with 10 columns, and you see only 2 columns, it's not acceptable, and it's better to display all the columns and see the correct flow. So here we just say that we will display all the states, whatever the condition. Okay. And finally, we have to modify the action by adding a key here, search default underscore group by state. Group by state is the name of my filter over here. And it's just to say, okay, I want to enable this, this filter each time I load the action. And let's see the result. Okay, is it correct? Yes. And now if I refresh the page, you will see that all the records are displayed on columns over here. And if I take the first record, I can drag and drop it on the last column, for example, because it's cancelled. Okay. So I will make I will maybe be a little quicker, but because I think that it's the end of the talk. So you can have an Onchange method, and it means that on the interface you can interact with the field values if some conditions are met. Here, I just add some fields on the customer, name, email, mobile, etc., and a link to the REST partner. So it's a basic model in Odoo on which there are already an email, an image, a phone number, etc. And I had a non-change method here, which is triggered by the partner ID fields. And I just say, OK, on my customer, if these information are set on the partner, I will set them on the customer. Okay. And if I show you the result, you can see on my customer now, it's not ready. You can see here that I have my partner here, and if I set an existing partner, the information are correctly filled. So the Onchange is only working on the interface, but it could be good to implement visual effects. But it shouldn't make a business logic like creating records, for example. It's a bad practice. And the last thing that I want to show you is the IR sequence model. It's to basically create a sequence for your order. So you want to keep a track of your order. For example, the first one will be order 001, the second one order 002, and you want to, as for the invoices, avoid gaps or avoid to have 2 invoices with the same sequence. Okay. So here I say that my plant order will be prefixed by order with a padding of 3, so 001, for example. And after, when there is 4 or 5 numbers, it will be 1000. Okay. And I just have to override the create method, for example, to modify the name if it's not set, to set the new value according to the sequence. And if I apply this, what did I do? Okay. Now, I have to refresh. If I create an order over here, you see that it's not working. Maybe it's not the correct thing. Yeah. Up. Okay, it's this one. When I will create an order, you will see that the sequence is correctly updated. Okay. If I create a new one, it's also the same thing, okay? So it's incremented automatically. Okay, this is all for today. Thank you for hearing me, and don't forget that all the slides of the presentation and the code that I showed you are all available on my GitHub account over here. Don't hesitate to clone the repository, and if you want, I can show you the final result. Yeah, I'm coming. If you want, I can show you the final result, because this module about plant nursery is also used for the other talks. And at the end, you have a full application to manage your plants. So if you want to discover new elements, the chatter, the mixins, and even the portal, you can play with it and see the result. It's really a complete application with 7,000 of lines at the end. Maybe I can show you, but I'm not sure. Oh, okay, something is wrong. But if you wish, you can go over there, and on my GitHub account, it's really working. I can ensure you. So, thank you. Est-ce qu'on a encore du temps pour des questions? On a encore du temps? So I still have 5 minutes for your questions, but if you don't have the opportunity to ask them, you can come by me after the presentation, and we will see this together privately, okay? So, questions? Was it clear? For the translations, it's different. When you want to, so the translation mechanism is in the framework, the basic framework, so it's already there. The only things that you should do to manage translations is to use the underscore notation. So, for example, on the plant nursery module, I can show you. So, here, my mouse is not working. So when you return a string, so a message you want to send to the customers, you can use underscore and put this message between the underscore. I just want to show you how it works, but okay. Okay, is it working now? Yeah. Up. For example, if you go on the sales models, there is probably an example to show you here. Up. For example, here. As I showed, you raise an error here, and the string is put here. Once the term is translated, if someone is logged in this current language, in this language, the label will be translated automatically. So it's a little difficult to show you this in 2 minutes, but after, if you want, I can show you. Okay? Is there another question? Yeah.
How would you do data import with an SQL?
XML is slower than CSV because you have to parse all the file to know the nature of the records you create. So it's not sure that on the same file you will create only partners, for example. It could be partners, sales orders. So you have to process all the file, and it's quite slow. But for example, you can do it on a CSV file. And in that case, you know that the model is always the same, and you can make all the creation in batch in single request. So that's what we do for the accounting localizations. So we have a lot of taxes, a lot of journals to create, and we do it in a CSV file. It only takes a few seconds, like 1 or 2 seconds. But if it's really an issue to create all these records, you can do it with SQL. So.
Wouldn't I run into like issues with interconnectivity with the over SQL?
Ah, okay. So what's the question?
The question is there a way to batch it? Like I'm doing it via Python with ORM with create just from a binary format.
Yeah, but as I said, if you import it using a CSV, all the records will be created in a single SQL request. So in that case, it's already batched. Okay, but with XML, it's impossible to do. You have to process all the records one by one. Okay. Okay. Is there another question? Okay. Thank you.
Talk about Odoo.sh for developers. Let's have a quick show of hands. Who has already heard of Odoo.sh? Okay, who has already used the interface of Odoo.sh? Okay. Who has already read some documentation of the Odoo.sh? Okay. Nice. So, what will we talk about in this course? If the internet connection works. Sorry. Okay. So first we'll see what is Odoo.sh and why did we make it. Then we'll go from development to production, which are the stages that we use in the Odoo.sh. Then we'll briefly show how to develop and deploy a feature on Odoo.sh. And then we'll go over what's new since last year. And then we'll make a small conclusion and questions and answers. Okay, so what is Odoo.sh? Odoo.sh is a hosting platform, but not just any hosting platform. It's really made to allow you to develop and keep on merging, keep on deploying your new features onto the production database that you will have hosted on Odoo.sh. So it allows you to host a database, to develop your features, to test them easily, and to deploy them without too much hassle. So it's tightly integrated with GitHub, which means we expect you to work with feature branches, so branches in which you develop your features, and then you will merge them to put them into production when they are ready and approved. And they will be automatically deployed by the platform based on the merging of the branches in GitHub. We also support submodules, which means that you can add custom code from other repositories without having to copy them into your repository, but just point towards another repository that you want to use. So what were the objectives of Odoo.sh? So we wanted to offer you the service just like Odoo Online to host your database for you, so you do not have to go through all of the hassle that is setting up a server, provisioning it, and all the problems that come through that. And we wanted you to allow you to develop your custom codes or community modules that were available. Then the focus for you is really on the development rather than the deployment. And finally, we want also to support apps from the app stores, from apps.odoo.com. So, how does Odoo.sh work? So you have, typically on the left, you can see 3 stages. So you have development stages where you will typically code and test that your code works fine. Then you have the staging where we'll test it on the production data. And then you have the production database where the real client's database is hosted on, and that's the one he will use. So in development, so these are the features you're working on, you are developing. Every time you push a new commit on one of these branches, you will automatically have a new build that is created, on which we will run all the unit tests. You will have the demo data to be able to play around and test the feature that you developed. You also have access to the logs should something go wrong, and also a shell access to the container on which the build is running. Also SSH access if you need it, if it's more convenient for you. And there is also an online editor to which that we'll see and use later on. In staging, as I said, it's really to validate the feature that you've developed. So you can show it to the client, and he will test the feature that you've developed on his real production data, except that it will all be neutralized because we don't want him to send real emails while testing the features, for example, and stuff like that. So there's an email catcher that you can see where all the mails that are sent by the database are caught, and you can see them here. All the scheduled actions are disabled by default. All the payment providers, the shipping connectors are all disabled so that you can really play around this environment. You will also have access to logs, shell and SSH, and the online editor in this stage. You will also be able to restore backups from the production database should you need to, should the customer have lost some data and you would like to find it in an old backup, for example, without having to restore it on the production database by replacing it altogether. Then the last stage is, of course, the production, where the client's data is, and it's the real company where all the client's users will connect and use Odoo. It has a default mail server set up that is provided, so you don't have to go through the problem of setting one up yourself. It's automatically backed by the platform, and again, you have access to the logs, the container through a shell, an online shell, and SSH, and also the online editor. So let's dive into it. Let's try to develop to an app, and of course, I have already set up a little project. So this is my project on Odoo.sh. I'm sorry, this I have to delete. Oops. So this is my production database. As you can see, I can connect to it by a single click here. As I am the administrator of the project, I can connect in one click as the administrator of the database. I have installed a few apps. It's rather empty. And I want to develop a new feature, and it so happens that the feature already exists on the App Store, because my client wants to add birthday wishes for his partners. So there's an app that does this. Here, it's free, perfect. I like it when it's free. I'll deploy it on Odoo.sh on the project I've made for this occasion. And so this will create a new branch in development that will fork my production branch, and it will add the app by downloading it, unzipping it, and pushing it in one commit to the branch. This is all done automatically by the platform. So this is an app that was rated 5 stars, so I will directly test it with my production data. Now, as you can see, the build is queued, so this will copy the production database and neutralize it so that we can play around in it. It should soon be done. All right, it's done. So let's first see what the module contains. So we'll open the online editor. And here is my container. It contains, here I can find the latest backups. Here are the data, so the file store and all the sessions. Here I can find the logs. Here are the Git repositories, and here is the source code. This is what interests me. I have Enterprise, that is installed by default, Odoo, Community, and the teams. And this is where my custom code lies. So I just have a small README file and the app that I just added. Let's see what's in it. I have a data folder. What's in the data folder? A cron to remind of the birthday wishes, probably. I can open it like this. Also a mail template to send an email. It's, as you can see, happy birthday. Maybe I could zoom in a bit, probably. Apologies. Then it has a few model changes. It's always good to review the code that you want to push into production, of course, where you have the method that will actually send the templates, render the template and send it by mail. And on the partner, you will have just the addition of a birthday field. Okay. And then finally, the views, where we inherit from the partner form and add, after the field email, we add our birthday field. So let's see what it gives. So now I'm connecting to the staging environment, the copy of my production branch, of my production database. So I will go to the apps. I have to update the apps list because I have added a new app. And now I can find the app that I just added. Let's install it. Okay. Okay, so let's see. If I go into the, apologies. If I go see the scheduled actions, I should probably see a new cron, birthday wish notifications. That will periodically check if there are any birthdays that he should congratulate people on. And on my contact, I should see the new field that should appear after email, but I don't see the birthday field. This is probably because it's invisible, but either way, I would like it to be on the left side. So I see this field is named VAT, so I will add it just after this field instead. So instead of after email, I put it after VAT. I save the file. All I have to do is go to the apps list again and upgrade birthday wishes. All I did was change the name field to VAT so that it would appear after the VAT field. And let's see if it worked. Here it is, date of birth. And so I can here add what's my date of birth, let's say next week. Of course, it's an empty database, you have to set up everything. Otherwise, you cannot make modifications to partners. Okay, suppose this is what my client wanted. I can leave him to test this feature in the staging branch, and once this is okay, all I have to do is drag and drop the branch and merge it into the production branch. And here I can see the production database is being updated as I just merged the branch there. And once it will be done, I will be able to install the module I just downloaded from the app stores into my production database. As you can see, it's all rather easy. Let's close this and this. And now, in my production database, I will have to go through the same process again to install. I have first to update the apps list, of course. And then I can install it in my production database. And my client is ready to use it. So as you see, it's quite easy to use it. Thanks to the online editor, it's quite easy to make changes. And everything you do is easily done. So let's go back to our presentation. So what has changed since last year? Because this was all things you could do since last year. So we added SSH access. This was done around that I can connect to him. I can import him from GitHub if I already use SSL on GitHub. So perfect, my key is imported. And then I can close this, copy this command again, and I can go in my terminal, but sadly I have no internet connection. It's back. Just going to show you then how you can pin your Odoo revision. And this is done in the settings of the production branch, where you can choose which dates you want to pin your revision on. And if you apply this, your Odoo code will not be updated and we will stay there, but we only support it for 3 months. So if you do this, you will get notifications, you will get emails to tell you that your your revision is about to expire, because we want to push people to stay up to date, of course. This is only as a workaround, a temporarily workaround should a bug be introduced recently. Okay, that was it. So, thank you. Are there any questions? Yes.
How restricted is Odoo.sh if I have a native extension for my application? Will it work with SSH?
Native, what do you mean like that?
Make a native module like with C++. And
Ah.
does that work or is it a problem?
Can you repeat the question, please?
If I make a native extension for Python and I
Not you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If the question is if you can make a native extension on Odoo.sh like in C++ and have it compiled. The thing is, you can do anything you want in user space, but you do not have access to roots on a machine, so you will not depends on what you want to do, but no. I don't know if that answers your questions. Yeah. Any other question? Yes, sure.
Now breakpoints coming to Jupyter.
Excuse me?
The breakpoints in Jupyter. Recently I attended a course, a smart class course, and there weren't any breakpoints so far.
To be able to add custom breakpoints in
Code is running, for example.
Okay. You cannot add breakpoints in the server that is running for the database. So sorry, the question was, can you add breakpoints in Jupyter? Are they coming? When are they coming? There's no such plans to add breakpoints in the Jupyter Lab extension for now. What you can do is simply you can start an Odoo shell and call the methods you want from there, which allows you to debug pretty much anything you could do with a debugger, a breakpoint. And you can also, as the server in staging environments are launched with --dev reload, this means that any modification you make to the Python code will immediately trigger a reload on the server, and it will be applied immediately. So if you add logging, for example, you will have immediately the logging that you will be able to use for debugging purposes. But introspection is available only through the shell, which is very easy to start if you just type. Oops. If the connection allows it, you can just type odoo bin space shell and you start a shell on your database. Okay? Good. Yes?
Yeah, so I have two questions. The first one is, we usually the message for testing, but then we move to production because of the SSL solution. True up by the true cloud. So first question, I want to know if that is resolved. Is there a better solution now as opposed to using the third party for SSL?
Yes, so now, I hope the connection is back. So yeah, this was for Boolean shell. It starts the server and then you can start debugging here. You have your environment and everything. Now for SSL I can show you because I actually have purchased a little domain on GoDaddy where I can, for example, add a custom domain. So I want to have Odoo.xp. This is my domain. I want to add this domain, and I will have to create a CNAME for the redirection, and it has to point to Odoo.xp. Yes, perfect. So my CNAME redirection is set up. I have added the domain here. And so now I should be able to access it here. And we have a scheduled action that's every hour tries to generate a certificate using Let's Encrypt to allow you to have the SSL verification when you connect to it. Yeah. I just did it before, but. Yeah. It probably takes a while before. Okay, here we go. It's set up, and oops, you can. It's already set up in HTTPS also because I already used the same name before. So it's already validated with Let's Encrypt, and the certificates is generated for SSL. And the second question, yes?
So, in their branches, I noticed when we use it for when a lot of people access any of the dev branches, it freezes, it hangs. So, is there a way to increase resources on any of the dev instances on Odoo.sh?
So, excuse me, so you're saying the development builds instances?
Yes, sometimes you want clients to be able to do UATs or check out new features and that. But we noticed that if maybe 5 or 10 out of the branch kind of freezes. So
The development, so when you connect to a development build, that's the interface freezes sometimes.
yes, you can navigate.
Well, the platform allocates a bit less resources to development builds than it does to the production database, of course. But typically it should be enough to withstand any sort of testing done by a couple of users. If you can show me how it freezes, I can probably help you debug it, but yes?
You spoke about the neutralization of the database when you pass to staging. Is it
Yes.
possible to customize this neutralization? For example, to add things to do to neutralize the database?
So the question is, when we neutralize a database in staging, can you add other other things to neutralize? Supposing you have probably a custom code that does certain API calls to other services when certain actions are done. There is no explicit hook on which you can do certain things. The safest way, if you want to ensure that these things do not happen outside of the production database, and if it's not inside an Odoo structure that exists like payment providers or shipping connectors and stuff like that, you probably, the easiest way is probably just to check if the cursor's database name matches the one of the production. And if it matches, then you can do the call. If it doesn't match, it means you are in the staging environment or any other test environment. That's the easiest workaround probably for that case. Okay? Yes?
So we notice performance degradation with event views. Now when the records exceeds 1,500, is that a known issue or something that is prevented?
So the question is, the performances are dropping when there are more than 1,500 pivot views? Okay.
When the records are 1,500.
It probably depends on model. So the question was, pivot views get slow when there are over 1,500 records on the Odoo.sh. I think it depends a lot on which model is you're viewing and what search queries it does behind it. And if there is slowness, you should probably look at what queries it does in the SQL database, in the PSQL database, and try to optimize those queries. We recently added a new log file where queries that take over 60 seconds are logged into it. So if you have performance problems, there is pg long queries.log, I believe, in the logs folder, which exposes the long queries that are problematic. And if you have long queries, you should probably just add an index somewhere on the table so that the queries goes faster. Excuse me?
So you said I could use a tool to actually see the long queries that
Yes, I can show you. So let's go into, we can connect to our database, and let's just select, well, it will take a while because we have to wait for, the query has to take longer than 60 seconds, and here I just, I just leave for 61 seconds, So when this query will be done, I will be able to find it in the logs. So here, for the moment, there are no long queries, but yeah, we have to wait 60 seconds, which is not optimal. But, yeah. This is just a little addition for debugging that's useful for you if you have problematic queries. And if there's anything in this log file, you should probably add some indexes on those tables. Yeah. But your problem seems to me that it's more standard Odoo, a performance issue of standard Odoo, rather than a problem with the platform. Yes, so as you can see here, I see that there was a slow query just now, and the query was select PG sleep 61. Gentleman was first, yeah?
How the migration works? I mean, what if we want to migrate from version 12 to version 13?
So,
Same way that the revisions?
no, the revisions that you configure here are all from the same branch, so all for V12, for example, and it's just different moments in the history of the same branch. But if you want to migrate to another version, you simply have to go into the Backups tab here. You download the dump of your production database. You first you can do it for testing purposes, because you will first want to test the migration process. And I believe they want the dump without the file store. This process is listed on the upgrades.odoo.com. You upload this database on upgrades.odoo.com. They will give you the migrated database. If you have custom code, you are responsible to migrate it yourself. And once the upgrade platform returns you your upgraded dump, you simply have to prepare a staging branch where you have your upgraded code. And here you will have to import the migrated dump. And the platform itself will detect that the installed version of the base module is 13 dot something, and so it will it will change the version of Odoo, and it will change to the version 13. And then you will be able to test if anything was broken or not, and make the required reparations. And when you do it for real, you just take an exact dump and you import it on the production branch. Yeah, sorry. I didn't repeat the question, I'm sorry. So the question was how to migrate from version. Yes, so next question?
Yeah, what if we need more than 3 months to test the revision?
Yes.
If we want to stay more than 3 months of this, what will you do at this time?
So
are you forcing the version?
So for the fixed revision feature, so it's all on the same version. Huh? So it's like if you want to stay on V12, but you want to be as stable as possible, so you fix the revision. You cannot save these changes if you do not have an email set up on your profile. And so it's simply here. And if you have an email set up, it will send an email when the revision will expire. It will send an email 1 month before, 1 week before, 3 days before. And when the final date arrives, we enforce an automatic upgrade. So you will have to make sure you can try it in a staging branch to ensure that changing to a new revision doesn't break anything, for example. But you will have to do this yourself. Yes? Otherwise, the platform migrates you automatically to the latest revision. I believe there was another question here.
If you're running on Odoo.sh with a production database, can you still have an interface to an outside application or database? For example, for payroll or...
So, yeah, you can connect as long as it communicates with the Odoo database itself. You can connect to any other application you want to it. The Odoo database probably just have to respond to some routes or query some other routes. A lot of people make some synchronization scheduled actions so that they synchronize data from the Odoo database to another service. Another question?
I have a question about
GDPR, yeah.
ensure that the databases are hosted on the local
So the question is about GDPR. How do we ensure that the data is stored inside the European Union? So currently, the data is stored where the production database is hosted on the region that you selected. And there is the backups, on the other hand, are stored in different data centers, at least in 2 different regions. That means one outside of the EU. And for now, they are stored on encrypted disks from Google Cloud. And that's it. So the data is encrypted elsewhere.
So
But
you can have personal data outside the backup system.
yeah, but the thing is, should somehow we use Google Cloud as a server hoster, and they by default have all the disk encrypted. So suppose an employee, data center employee steals a hard disk and they runs away with it, it will all be encrypted, so it will be useless for him. But we store it. We store it there, and we have the keys to decrypt it if you need it to back on your server. But the default hosting location for Europe is in Belgium, unless you get a dedicated server where you can choose among all the locations offered by Google Cloud. Okay?
Sorry.
Yes?
On the privacy policy of Odoo.sh, they said that you're hosting on OVH.
That's Odoo Online. Odoo.sh is strictly hosted only on Google Cloud.
Okay.
And Odoo Online is hosted on OVH, yes. And it's partly hosted on OVH and partly on Google Cloud. They have a bit of both. Okay. If there are no more questions, the session is over.
this presentation, and let's just start. So today, maybe you've been attending earlier this afternoon with the backend part of Odoo. So you might have seen how to use the ORM, and so the model part of Odoo, which handles all of the business logic. And in this presentation, we're going to see two things. The first one is the website. So how can you create the website with Odoo? And the second one is how to use the website builder. So it's just like this. So just to clarify just a little bit, we have in Odoo, in the context of Odoo, two terms that we use. So we have the backend and the front end. And so the backend is everything that the enterprise needs to administrate his enterprise. So it's for administrator and the user of Odoo. And we are not talking about that today. So we are going to talk about the front end. So the front end is simply the website. So you have the e-commerce, the blog, the forum, and everything. And so what are the different languages that we use at Odoo? And the first one is Python. Python, we use it for the backend, and so the business logic and everything, and also for the controllers. And so I will just go in a few slides about how to create your controllers, and we are going to use Python for this. The next thing is QWeb and HTML. QWeb is the rendering engine which will render HTML. It was originally made by Anthony Le Suisse, which is the technical director of Odoo, and that's it. And the next one is JavaScript. So you might know already JavaScript, and so it will handle everything in the client side, and it's only used in Odoo for the clients and never on the server. So that's about it. So the first thing, the website. So we're gonna observe we're gonna make a simple flow of the user in Odoo. When the user visits an URL, then it goes to a controller. The controller is, as I said already, created in Python. And then we render the view. And for the view, we use QWeb, HTML, and JavaScript. So let's build a controller together. So the very first thing that you need when you create a controller is simply to import the class, to import the object request, and the decorator root. So this is what looks like a simple controller in Odoo. So the first thing that you need to do is to create a class, and a class can be any name, and it's just a namespace where you can put all of your controllers. And so if you create a new module, it can be very large, or you can just cut it the way you want. And so you just create a class that extends the controller that we just imported just before. So then we use the decorator root, and the first argument is the URL that you need to listen. Then you declare your method, and then you can create any kind of logic that you want in Python. And then what you do is that you can render the template. And here, as you can see, we will see later how you can create the template in QWeb, and you use XML identifier. This is the way we call it in Odoo. And here I call it my template TPL name, and you can see that it has the same idea. So that's it. So let's talk about the additional parameters that we can put in a controller. So in the declaration, as you can see, I can specify that in my URL I need to have an argument that is a page. And we can also observe here that I put a default argument for the page. So if none is provided, we will have one by default. Then we have the optional parameters. So let's say that you are declaring your routes like this, and you only specify the plant. You can still, if you have an URL that looks like this, have additional parameters, and the way that you catch them is simply like this. Whether you specify directly the an argument in your method, or you can use the keyword arguments, and you can also have defaults on that. You can also specify multiple URLs if the first argument of the route is a list. Simply like this, and then it's exactly the same. So this is like this, that we declare it. You can also have authenticated user, and simply you have a key that you specify in the declarator, and if you specify that it's for user, it's going to be only for logged in user. So in Odoo, the website, we provide a way for user to automatically sign to Odoo, and this is the way you do to say this is only for the authenticated users. You can also return JSON. So let's say that you have you do an AJAX call from your JavaScript, and you prefer to receive JSON. Simple. Again, it's just a key that you specify, and then depending on what is the return type, it will transform it automatically in JSON format. So we saw that the user is visit the URL. We've just built QWeb is simple and powerful. It's very simple. This is QWeb, and so the thing that you see is it looks like HTML, and we have special attributes that are directive, and these directive will have some specialities that will help to do different things. And so in QWeb, the directive work on any kind of tag. So here I have a span, I have a div, and I have everything that you want. So then we have the variable, and I don't know if you remember when we've built the controller, is the second argument that we pass when we use the render. The first one was the template name, and the second one is the value that you want to provide. And so it will be available in QWeb. So this is exactly what I just explained. So this comes from that. So now let's see at some example of QWeb, and we are just observing the T field. So here, one thing in QWeb is that you don't have to close the tag. If you close it and it's a span, when you will render it, it will warp the variable that you have into the span. So here we are using the T field, and so if you want to render it, as simple as that, it's rendering the plant.name. And in the screen we can see like this. And the D field is something that you want to use for your website. If I will show you later the website builder. When you use the website builder and use the T field, there is some magic happening. You will be able to edit the field, and it will have a direct impact in the database. So here, the example is that you are on the shop and you have the name of the article, and so because it's a T field, you can change it. and the field can be a string and can also be a number. So yeah, I precise, this is a T field directive. And so if it's a number, of course you can also change the price, and so it's very easy then for the people that change the website that directly change all of the values. So you want to use T field whenever possible. Then the second one is also to show some value on the page is the TESC, which stands for escaping. So if you have a string that you need to escape, this is the directive that you want to use. And so here, if I have provided the variable page on the rendering, what it will do, I think you can already guess what it will do. It will render simple as this, this element, and then you can see the result on the page, simple as that. Like every templating system, you also have the condition, so TIF, and as you can see here, this is the syntax. And now the next one in the family is the T for each, which here you can see that this is a directive that needs another directive to work. And so if I have a list of plant lists, I will have this variable that will be set. And as you can guess, now it will render all of new list elements with the plant name. And because it's T field, of course, you can change it on the website builder directly. So just an example here. And now the T call. The T call is to call. So if you have like a template that you have defined in another file or in the same file, you can simply call it with this syntax, and it will simply warp the element that you have with the layout that you have created earlier. And so here is the example. Now let's talk about inheritance. So in Odoo, it's common in Odoo to push things on something else. So if we have a different model, so it was like for the previous talk in the backend, this is the same with the ORM. So if you have a class and you want to add some functionality into the class, you just push it by declaring the same model, and it will push it. And so in Odoo, we do these kind of things. And so so here I am. If I want to include some CSS, then I have to inherit the asset frontend, where is defined all of my CSS that is already defined, and I use the XPath to select where do I want to position my next elements, and everything that you will include inside this tag will be included into the template, and so you can do whatever you want. And so you think when you are beginning in Odoo, there is maybe sometimes a source of confusion. Because you might think that, okay, I know QWeb. But no, you don't know QWeb. It's not possible. Because there is not only one QWeb. In fact, there is two QWeb. And this knowledge, my friend, is very useful. So, in fact, you have the QWeb in Python and the QWeb in JavaScript. And these are two different beasts, even though they look like the same. So the first one, you can spot it in this with this syntax, because you declare it this way, and JavaScript, you have a different way to declare it, is this way. So remember this, because it's very useful. So usually everything is made mostly in Python. And so QWeb is used at a different place in Odoo, and it's also used in for the report. So the report. So if you need to do a report in Odoo, you are using QWeb for Python, and it will render an HTML page, and it will be in this way. And so if you want to do a web page in Odoo, you're also using the Python, the QWeb Python. This is the way you do it. But later on, if you need to add some dynamic things happening on the screen, and you want fancy things, then you are using, you declare your template in JavaScript, and then when you will use, when you need to render it, you will say, if you use the widget in Odoo, the JavaScript widget, then you will say, I will need this template, and it will be on this kind of file here. So I think now you're prepared. So we just did the website now, and let's dig into the website builder. The website builder. So we're gonna see how can we create snippets in the website builder. But what are the snippets? They are reusable. You can drag and drop them. They are using QWeb, and it's made in JavaScript also. So it's time for demo. So the website builder, you can use it simply by clicking this button edit, and then you can drag and drop elements inside your website, and it's very easy. You might have seen it in the presentation of Fabien, and as you see, when I click on one snippet, I have option over here. And so it's if you have elements that are nested, elements inside elements, then you can select them by simply putting your cursor like this. And so each of the elements have different kind of options that you can set into it. And so because we are in the theme of plants, because Yannick created a plant nursery, let's continue in this story. And so we are creating together, we're going to create a snippet that is a plant for the plants. And so as you can see, I have a fake data. So I have the fake plant here. And there is so here I have 3, and I can say that I want 4 or 5. And if I save it, as you will see, we have the real data that shows the different plants. So that's it for the demo. So we are going to make it editable. If you want to do that, you have to precise on the root, as we saw for declaring the root, that you need to include the website key to true. There we go. And the thing that you need when you want to have a web page that where you can include blocks inside, you have to say that the class is an OE structure, and that the ID starts with the OE structure underscore, and then it will automatically make the zone droppable, and this is the way that you make your page able to include the snippets. And if you do that, you are good to go. So this is this line. So let's create the snippet. First, you need a snippet template. And this is the system template that you need. So first, you are declaring the template this way. You precise the ID of the template. And what you do is that the template has to contain an element that is a section or some other elements, so that the website builders know that when you click on something that is a selection, it knows that you can drag and drop it. If you had like divs, all of the divs, it would make it difficult to drag and drop everything on the page. So one way to say it is to say, okay, this is a selection, so the system knows that it can drag and drop it. And we make a class because we will use it later. And here we are creating a data inside the tag because we want to have the option to have the limit of the number of plants that we have. And then the next important things that we need to do is to create a placeholder. So we're creating a div which has a class. We name it the way we want, so that we will be able later to use JavaScript and to inject the content inside. So as you saw, there were like multiple plants that we show, and so we injected into this specific class the content. Then what you need to do is to add something in the sidebar, in the sidebar. And so, as I explained earlier, we use this inheritance principle that is used widely in Odoo. And so, to do that, when you create the template, you specify that you want to inherit specifically the website.snippet. This is where all lands all of the existing snippet in Odoo. And so to do that, you are using an XPath expression to target exactly where you want to put the snippet in the bar. And then you use this syntax to have some magic happening and to have the snippet shown in the screen. And so you can provide here a thumbnail for the snippet. Then what you need is a JavaScript template. And so as I explained earlier, we can spot here that this it starts with template with a S. The previous one was without a S. It could be a source of confusion if you're not prepared. Something that is transparent. So when I use the T-if, I forgot to tell you that the T stands for being transparent. So that's the way you use it. So here you declare your template, so T name. So you will be able to reuse it later with this name. And then here is an example of what we do to show the different plans. So T for each, and then we escape, and we are good now. Then this is the little things that we need to do to be able to inject it, to inject all of our data inside the placeholder that I shown you earlier. So let's dissect it. So here you define a module in Odoo. This is the way we define every module in Odoo, and so this is the first thing that we do. Then the second thing, we are requiring a library that is the core in Odoo, and that will contain the QWeb. This is going to be used for rendering the JavaScript QWeb. Then we are using the public widget, which has a registry, and this is where you register the widget, so you can reuse it later, and you will see how to do that. So here we are creating the widgets. We are doing two things in this line. So we are adding to the registry with the name S promo plan, and we are creating at the same time the widget. And so here is a selector to specify exactly which snippet we want. And so here we are defining where is the JavaScript template. And so this is another hint to know if you are in a JavaScript QWeb or in a Python QWeb. Here is JavaScript because it's in a static SRC XML. This is the usual path that we saw when it's JavaScript QWeb. And so by providing here this table, the system will automatically load the asset. And then we have 4 methods that we are just now going to see what there is inside. The first one is very simple. So we just initialize an empty variable, so we can then store our different plants inside. The second thing that we do is like when the widget starts, what it does, it will load the plants. And we're going to just see now what we'll do in the loading the plants. Very simple. So we are using an RPC call to fetch in the database the different plant that we have. And here, as you see, there is I can precise that we are using like the model the model of the plant that we already have in the system. We want them to be already published, so we provide a domain, and we are selecting the fields that we want only. And then here we are using the data limit. If you saw on the elements that we had before, we precise we make it precise the limit, and so this is where we are using this data. So then what we do, because we have initialized already this variable, we put the result inside, and what we want then is to render the plant. And rendering the plant, we are using the QWeb rendering system, and this is in JavaScript the way you do it. So you call core.qweb renderer, you precise the ID of the template, and then you just provide the data for the template. And then you use a jQuery selector to replace the row, so it was the placeholder that we saw just before. That's it for QWeb. Now let's see how can we customize it with the option. So first we need to make option templates in QWeb as usual. So this is the way you do it. So now I think you become accustomed to, you know exactly how to do it. You have a template with an ID, and we are inheriting the same as I said before, and we are pushing into the option, which is an element we are pushing. So here is a template. We are pushing all of the option inside, and so we are using XPath to say I want to place it inside. And as you can see here, we have an element, and we provide data-js, which means which is the public widget that we have precised before. And it was, remember, registry.s promo plans, and this is where we are using it. And we say that we want to select the promo plans. And here is a little special syntax to provide the option, and you have automatically a toggler, and so you don't have to create your own togglers. Is done for you, and we can create as many buttons as we want to say how many plans that we want to be able to precise. And there is more. The in-place editor. So this is a very nice way to try the QWeb. So it's another demo time, and so here what I will do is that I will use the in-place editor, and as you can see here, this is all of the snippets that are on my page. And remember, I said that the selection is the snippet usually use the selection tag to be defined. And so if I remove all of them and I save, they will be all gone. And if I edit the page and I add a new snippet, it will be there. So I think now you see the connection. I hope you see the connection between all of the mechanics here. And thank you very much. Yep.
Maybe I missed something, but what about the magic in the T field? How does it knows how to write something in the database?
So when you are writing your controller, if you are using the model, so let's say that you are using plant.search, you are searching for a plant. So then this is a Odoo model, and then when you will render it with a T field, the QWeb in Python will know that it is an Odoo object. So it will add some metadata to the tag, and so therefore it will be available on the page. And when it's rendered and you are in this editor, then it knows with that metadata that when you change it, it needs to change this specific data. Yep.
What is the best way to do the same thing for a Odoo, for example, form view?
For a what?
For a form view, Odoo form view.
Yes.
Or tree to add a new widget without extending. So we extend the widget.extend, but it's like adding, for example, a Google Map widget to the Odoo backend, the form view or a widget to the tree view or something like that.
Yes, it has a different mechanic for the backend, and so I'm not really sure how to make this for the backend. It has a little bit different mechanics, but you can get to me afterwards, and I can search and I can answer it.
Where do you put all this code? What is the structure of the where is the code?
Yep. So yeah, I can show you. So yeah, sorry, I didn't precise it. All of the code I write here is available on GitHub on my account, and so if you want, I can just show you the structure. So this is it. So we have in so this is our plant nursery. I have some data here, but this is the module that we have here in Odoo. And here I have the snippet, and I can define as many templates as I want in this file, and as long as this file is included in the manifest. So I include this file in the manifest, and all of the templates that I define here is available when I need to search it. Welcome. But so this is important because this is this other way that you know how if you're in the JavaScript QWeb or in the Python QWeb, because in JavaScript you click on static, src, XML, and usually you place it in this way, and so you don't have to include it into a manifest, for instance, because this is when I said this is the XML dependency. When you are in JavaScript, you precise the path, and then this is where you precise it, and so it will load when it needs to load it. Yep.
The Python QWeb you said, right? The Python QWeb and the JavaScript QWeb.
Yes.
QWeb are saved in the database, right?
What do you mean by saved in the database?
The template.
Yes, yes. These one are in the database, yeah.
Yeah, right. But this JavaScript QWeb, they are not saved in the database, right?
Yes.
That means whenever you visit the website, they are just pulled from the server.
Yes. Yes. Or they are in the asset. So there is in the a mechanism with the asset to bundle them. So when you are in dev mode, you are like allowing them to always reload them, but true, they are on the server.
That means whenever you have done some modifications in your JavaScript QWeb, you don't have to upgrade your module or
yes, you do.
Update your module.
Yes. Thank you. So if you have other question, just feel free to ask me.
We still have 20 minutes. Could you demonstrate it once again? Live.
In live, maybe I can show. I can go and do a walkthrough about the code. Would you like a walkthrough in the code? So let's do a walkthrough in the code, so we can see in context. So this repository is a mix of the previous talk of Yannick earlier, where it combined everything to increase the size. Yeah, sure. So if I do this. So, as you can see here, I have defined my my controllers in this file, and if you want to know how this file is included, it is included in the init here. So it's in this controller init.py, and then it will be this one will be initted from this one. And so this is the connection. And here, as you can see, there is example of different controllers that are all defined in the same file. But I could have been splitting them the way I want to organize my code the way I want. And here, for instance, I have the portals that are written here. And this is just the way you prefer to organize them. So we didn't.
But is the snippet using this or not? The snippet is not using this.
The snippet is also using this. No, the snippet is not using not using the data from the controller. No. No.
That's when you want to point to that URL.
Yes, you want to point to that URL. You want to render any kind of QWeb template, so you create a controller and.
But that page is then not editable in the website builder.
Which?
The page that's rendered there is a control. When you go to /plant.
Yes.
This renders a page, and this page is not editable in the website builder.
Yes, is it? It is. Here I'm able to edit the page.
And if you want to add a T field there, can you do it?
Yes.
You need to go back on the.
So.
Okay, you edit it through there.
Yes, I have a different way to edit it, and that's one way. Or I can go directly to the page layout, and it's also one way to do it.
One of my customers would love to have a way to drag and drop a specific field or a specific object model and to put it in a specific place on the page. So without having to edit, but to do it graphically.
Ah, you mean that you have all of the model accessible and you want a specific... so it's like Odoo Studio for the websites.
Yes, yes. And like you have it in some way in the form builder. In the website editor you have the form builder, and in the form builder you can say this form will generate a lead, and then you can choose the list of fields that are available on the lead.
Yes.
That's something that you have. And that's nice, and you make a field. But the same would be interesting not to generate a form, but to generate a page that renders.
Yes. I don't want to spoil the next version of the of the website builder, but maybe maybe in the future it's gonna be amazing, and it might be possible. So. So here is all of the code that I shown you earlier in the slide. This is exactly the same code, and I have here two different files that I have included in my asset, and one is for the editor itself. So it's the code of the widget for the editor itself. So I'm using the web editor snippet option, and so I include into the registry of this one. And here I am using the public widget registry. And so this is why I am able to have different. I have demo data when I'm on the website builder, and I have the actual data when I'm on the real page. Do you have any other questions?
Using websites in a compliance environment, so where JavaScript usage is restricted, do you have any tools for verifying JavaScript? Use of JavaScript on websites?
Well, can you provide me with an example?
Banks or sometimes government institutions basically say JavaScript is not allowed, but it is allowed if there is a verification process which meets the compliance requirements.
What kind of compliance?
You can ask me that. No, I have to remember. Actually, I don't know. I'm going to have to. I don't know.
Okay.
It was a general question if you do that, if you offer that kind of tool.
I'm not really aware of that yet. It might be possible.
I'll come and talk to you afterwards.
Yep. Okay, sure. So thank you very much. I think we don't have more questions, and have a nice Odoo experience.
All right. If you could just please have a seat, we'll get started. Okay, thank you. So, thank you very much for being here. This talk will be about Odoo Studio and using it as a prototyping tool. I'm Luc Nellis, I work as a product owner, and before that I worked as a consultant. So for 2 years I implemented Odoo for customers. I worked on a lot of different projects. So what I'm going to explain today is partly based on, for example, my own experiences. So Odoo Studio, first of all, if some of you are new to Odoo or Odoo Studio, just a short introduction on what this tool is about. So Odoo Studio is basically an application that you can install on your database. And from it, it's basically a tool you can use to customize your database and change all the things that you think would better fit your business by being a bit modified. So you have different levels of customizations you can do. You can customize the database itself. So for example, there is an information you would like to gather and catch in the different forms, but it's not supported in standard because, for example, we don't have a field for favorite color of the customer because it's not really useful for all businesses, but in your case you need it. Well, with Studio, you can create it on the fly. The interface can also be modified with Studio because let's say you have your field. Well, you want to put it in the view, right, so that users have it and can fill it in when they're creating, for example, a new customer. Then you can also modify your reports. So in Odoo, when we talk about reports, it's mainly the PDF documents that you will send to your customers. So a sale order, an invoice, a purchase order, all the different documents that you will generate from your system and send by email, etc., to your different partners. So this can also be changed with Studio because you will likely want to make it really nice and really personal because you want your logo, you want some information displayed on top of it, some specific terms and conditions that we don't support in standard, etc. And then you can also work a bit on the flows that you will have on the system. So nothing really as big as a development because there's no huge business logic you can implement with Studio, but still a few customization, a few automated actions that make your life easier. For example, you click a button and there's an activity that appears for your accountant, for example, without you having to do all the work manually. Okay, so that's what Odoo Studio is about. And the main added value is that you're doing that without any programming knowledge. Okay, so it's really a tool for functional people or business people to work without having to need a developer. If you want to know more on it, we won't be able to spend a lot of time on the application itself. There's another talk with a guy you may recognize because that's me on Friday morning. And there we will really work on the tool, sort of with a tutorial where during 50 minutes we will create an application from scratch, which means we start from an empty database and we create an application only with Studio, zero code allowed, and an application that has to serve a purpose with a flow and an idea of something that has to happen behind it. Today the focus is rather on prototyping because let's say you work on a big project. Well, you have an army of developers working with you, but you still want to make sure that you optimize the way you manage your project. And prototyping is part of it. So if you're the cliche bad project manager, you will say, well, why should I prototype? It's useless, right? We spend a lot of efforts on it. We have to spend a lot of time with the customer to build something, think about it, etc. It delays the release because we spend a lot of time working on a product that is not the final product, just a fake one. So we don't really like that. And it creates a lot of frustration because the user has to check what we do and validate it, etc., etc. And so at the end of the day, we lose time and money, and prototyping is not efficient. Of course, if you're here, I think you agree that it's not the right way of seeing this issue. So to have it showed in a different way, we'll talk about what I call the swing analogy. So let's say you meet a customer and the customer says, well, we need a system suspended by ropes and on which we can sit. The goal is to swing on it, right? So basically he wants you to build a swing. Of course, if you've worked with customers, you know you will add something like, please keep it as cheap as possible. So this is how the customer explained it to you, right? As the project manager or the business analyst. And what he had in mind was this, that maybe not exactly what he explained, but that's what he had in mind. That's what he thinks he needs. As the project manager, you listen to everything, took a few notes, and this is what you understood, right? It checked all the boxes. It's a system suspended by ropes. You can sit on it, and you can swing, right? So that's in your mind what you have. Then you get on your car, and you brief the developer, right, or the lead developer. And so before that, of course, no documentation, right? You just turn on your Bluetooth, and you brief him while you're going back home. The programmer is at least sort of happy with what you gave him, and he disappears for 2 months, and then that's what he writes, based on your briefing, right? You can sit on it, I'm sure I could, and you can swing it, sort of, right? But you can see there's already quite a mismatch. Now, since you started from scratch with a meeting you had on the fly with a customer and then a briefing on a car, this is how much your solution is integrated in the system you're working at. So for example, here, this is how much you're supported into the Odoo framework, right? Because you just invented something from scratch. Then of course, 2 days before the go live, when the user tests the application, they see that, well, this is not at all what they needed, right? They cannot work with that. So you put all your developer on a 48-hour sprint, and this is the disaster recovery plan they managed to put out, right? Because, I mean, they couldn't do any better, and with the new briefing, that's what they could do. Of course, this is not at all what the customer needed. What the customer needed was just that, right? Because it's a system suspended by ropes, you can swing, and it's as cheap as possible, right? So note that it's different from what the customer had in mind, right? That's what he really needed. So he wanted 3 stairs, but there's no reason for it, right? He just wants 2 swings. So if you take a tire, it's cheaper, and it does the job. But of course, guess how it was built? Like this, of course. Because basically you had to do the final product version 1, and then put your customer on an 84-hour or 48-hour crunch, right? Just to have a system that was sort of working, the disaster recovery plan, right? So you see, as with a really simple briefing and a basic need, you can go all around the place. And that's one of the main risks of project management in terms of implementation is miscommunication. And it's really a big factor that you should take into account when you're working on a big project with bigger developments. So, of course, when I say communication, I don't mean that at all. Just show that to the developer, and I'm pretty sure he will be really mad at you because there's no way that with that you can easily understand what the customer needs or what has to be done, right? It's all over the place, and I mean, I wouldn't even know where to start, right? You have things moving, arrows, etc. So when I think about communication, I don't mean that, because if you have spaghetti drawing, you will have spaghetti code, right? Because the developer will start from an arrow here and then do the next one and then realize that it's actually not correct. You should go back to another, etc., etc. So again, not a good way of doing it. Of course, you know that we are here to show how we can actually do that easily, and that is with Odoo Studio. So we'll have a look at how exactly you can do that with Odoo Studio and how simple it is. So let's say I want to work on contacts. So I just go on the contact form. I take a form. For example, this guy will do it. I open Studio. OK, I just toggle Studio. Here, I'm going into Studio mode. So that's from here that I can customize. For example, the website, the customers, I'm in a meeting and they say, well, website for us is really important. We need it at the top. So I'm not going to take a screenshot and draw an arrow. I'm going to tell him, OK, so right here, perfect. All right, let's keep moving. Actually, website link for us, can you just put link? OK, so I just change the label here. That's it. I click somewhere else, saved. Job position. Oh, well, we don't really care for the job position. Can you just, for example, remove it? OK, remove from the view. Here you go. And then the phone, etc. And you keep going, and you see that you have a live answer from the system, right? Then you will say, well, what we need about people here is, for example, the birth date of the customer. And it's not a standard field. So you just create a new field. You take date here, and you say, OK, where do you want it? Well, just below here. All right. How should we call this field? We should call it birth date. Here you go. So here you have, just in a few seconds, Odoo is creating the fields, so the columns in the database to store the information, and adding it into the view so that your user can fill that in. Then maybe you will say, well, here, salesperson, for us, we cannot have a customer without a salesperson. Otherwise, nobody knows who has to take care of him. So let's just put that as required. Again, saving saved. Here I am. And here I get my view already. Let's just refresh to be sure I have all the changes. And I can start making a test, right? You see I have here my field. Here it's a date field, right, for the birthday. And let's say I want to create, for example, a new one. I will say, this is my new customer. I try to create it, and I can't, because the field salesperson, we've done it together, is mandatory. So you see, with just a few clicks, talking with the customer, and as a functional person, I'm not doing code, I don't have any technical knowledge of all the details that are happening, I'm able to create the prototype with the customer step by step. So who is actually able of doing it? Well, the customer could do it. So if you're the customer, the project manager in the customer side, when you're, for example, working on the requirements that you will require from the partner or from Odoo or for any integrator, you could work with Studio and prepare already a few screens that the developer will be able to integrate. Or if you do workshops, for example, you meet your own accountant and you check with him, okay, what do you think of this invoice? Maybe I would like this field here, or I should need a bit more information there, etc. So step by step, the customer can do it. The pre-sales team as well, right? You're starting a huge project, you're trying to evaluate how expensive it will be, how much development is needed. Well, you start from a standard database, and you customize it step by step until the customer says, yes, with this system, I think I should be able to work and have all my flows. So then you forward that to the developers, and they work on it. The project manager as well, while the project is well started, could use Studio because, for example, when writing specifications, if I tell the developer, oh yeah, there's a new field I need you to create, can you just put it like somewhere here? It's not as precise as actually doing a new field, showing exactly where it is. Plus here, the developer already knows I want a date field, not a text field, a date field. So the project manager, the pre-sales team, the customer, they can all do it because there's no programming knowledge required. So that's the main game changer. Now, just to sum up, so we have the added value of Studio is the following. It's super fast. You've seen how we did it. You can add fields, move them, rename them, etc. Imagine the opposite with a process where I just take my notes and I send it to the developer that has to work on it to have a fully working system and work for a few days. Here, I just drag and drop and I get going. It stays functional, which is really important because I'm in a business meeting or flow-oriented meeting. I don't want to have to wonder about the technical issues or the technical dependencies, etc. What I want to know is that, okay, I need a field, I just drag and drop it, and I can go from there. So it stays functional, and it allows you to be focused on what matters most, which is the business flow. It allows you to be agile as well. So you can take any feedback given by your customer and just incorporate it in the prototype. So the customer doesn't want the field birth date anymore, I can remove it in a click, right? Whereas if my developer disappears for 2 weeks, to work on something, then at the end of the day I will get a final result that I really hope, finger crossed, my customer will like as is, because otherwise we have to start again. It's live, so you can just do it on the fly and it keeps reacting, and you don't have to schedule another meeting in 3 weeks because you're not sure how you're going to do it and how it would look like, etc. You just go for it and you keep going. And at the end of the meeting, when you leave, it's clear, there's no miscommunication because every stakeholder has seen the same screen and has validated the screen. So you avoid screenshots that, like the one I showed you where I have no idea how it would look like if everything is done. When we leave the meeting, we know where we're heading to, and it's clear for everyone. And for the developer, it's better because he can just replicate that, but with clean code on his side, and the structure is there. So to conclude, prototyping is a painful process. This I can agree, especially for bigger projects. But it's crucial, especially even more for complex implementation. But with Odoo Studio, it becomes fast and easy, so you have no excuse of not doing it. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Why is it only prototyping? Why couldn't you just change it and leave it as it is?
Yeah, so here the idea is that we are just planning a really big development. And so we just playing around, seeing the different screens, because we know we will have a developer working on it. Indeed, if the project stays that simple, I could just use it as it is. The issue is that usually you want to avoid combining development and customization, because then you have two custom modules, one done by Studio, one by your developer, and it becomes complex to maintain. So I would say either you go fully for Studio, because it's really simple. What the customer needs is a few fields, a few views, some changes here and there, and that's it. Then go for Studio. It's super fast, super cheap, and that's it. If you want to implement, for example, a business logic behind, or automated actions, or really, AI or anything really complex behind, I would say do the prototype with Studio so that it's clear, but don't keep those fields, because the developer will prefer to create its own field in his own module rather than having to rely on everything you've done in Studio. So Studio is by itself is made for projects where you can work with it straight away without development. But if you want to combine it, I would say Studio for the prototype, or maybe for customizations that are not in the flow. So for example, you have Studio because you customize the invoice, then the developer will say, I don't mind, because I won't go there anyway. But the fields that are needed in the business logic, in the business flow, please let me create my own fields with the names I know in a place where I can put everything as I want for the development you're asking me.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
After prototyping, what are you giving to the developer? I mean, you have a live session with the customer, and you do everything okay.
Yeah.
So when you come back to the developer, what will you give him in order to build his own development?
Yeah. So there's many things actually you could give him. First, access to the database, because he's able to check here. He's able to have access to the code. He can check the views, the code, etc. With Studio, he is also able to export a module. So he will have a module with all the code that you've written by drag and dropping. So that's already a clue for him. And it can also be used as a support for the meetings or the specifications that you will have. So depending on the complexity, you will maybe just send him that, and that will be enough.
Does he have a way to know what you did? I mean,
Yeah.
There is always this X before.
That's it. So
that's the only way to.
There's two things, but then it becomes a bit technical. All fields created by Studio are flagged as being custom fields, so their technical names start with X_Studio_. So for the developer, it's easy to see them. And everything done in the view is actually added in a view. So that's the standard code. And I have a view here, Odoo Studio, with all the change I do. So this is a Studio view that says, I take the standard field and I do this. I take the standard view and I do this. So you
all
give
the
that.
Changes are here.
All my change done with Studio are here. So if I, for example, deactivate this view, I would go back to the standard. So everything I do with Studio is well ordered in specific places. So my developer, if he has a doubt, he can see that's not a standard field, and he can see here I'm back to the standard with a normal website link, job position, etc. So it's for him it's easy to really see what you've done.
But he doesn't know that you've changed that specific form. You have to tell him that you changed the form. There's no change log of all the changes.
There's not really. I mean, I wouldn't use a change log, but he can quickly go in the list of all the views of the system and check for all the ones that are called Odoo Studio, for example, and would have a list with maybe changes you don't even know you did or don't remember, but they're in the system, so he would find them.
Does that mean they need to use the same system, or we can combine it with Odoo.sh, or so you can use the brain dev or the plugin working together with the developer and the VA?
Yeah, so as I was explaining, usually we try to really separate what is part of the development and the business logic so that it stays in the hand of the developer and the development does not rely on any Studio module, because then it becomes tricky to maintain. But still, they can live together. There's no really constraint, rather than it's just we don't really encourage it. But for example, if the birthday field here, if it's not in the development at all, because it's just a field people will fill in, I can keep that one. And all my huge logic in, for example, the CRM that I will do through a development, this will be done by the developer. So both can coexist without any issue. The only thing I would say is don't try to make them live intertwined, because there, for the developer, it's tricky, and he won't like you at all, trust me. Yeah?
Do you have to install, or is it kind of an option you have in every object?
It's an application that you have to install on your database, but as soon as you install it, it's available everywhere.
Okay.
So for example, if I go into the CRM, I have the same option, etc. So it's both the tool to create your customization and the one to maintain them as well, if you want to keep that for your live system. But as soon as it is there, I can go in my calendar, for example, and still customize my calendar, for example. It's everywhere.
And I can back up all what I did.
With all the customization I did with Odoo Studio. So the views, the fields, the models, everything I do with Studio is there. And for me, maybe it does not make much sense. But if I give that to the developer, he can open it with a code reader, and he can see what I did straight away, without having to check my database.
And I can restore them to a new database and get all the changes done.
Indeed. So if that's a test database, and the customer says, perfect, that's everything I want, I don't need to go further, I can go to the production database, and I would do the same, Studio, and here I would say import. And I would put the zip file I just got, and all my customizations will be installed as well. So the fields, the models, etc. So after this installation, I would get the customized system. Yeah?
How would you prototype something like a custom report where like the customer has a specific need where they want specific measures or rows or specific grouping in a pivot table, for instance, and where you know that you need a chunk of like demo data to be able to properly represent it, as well as need to implement some kind of business logic just to make the report work. How would you prototype that in a way that the developer understands what to do?
There is indeed, I mean, there are some use cases where you're limited even with Studio because you cannot customize those kind of views or objects. In those cases, I would say you have to go back to the good old techniques. But at least for all the easy stuff that's done, for the reports, it really depends the complexity you want to do, because maybe it's not worth spending 3 days building the prototype with Studio on a report, while for the developer it's really short, and with just a drawing it could work. It really depends. For example, what I did, I had a project where they had to work with dates that they had to communicate to the customers, and basically they wanted to know what is the next arrival of products I can announce to my customer, making sure that I do block an item. So there's a huge business logic and inventory logic, etc. behind that was done by the developer. But with Studio, we were able to decide where the date fields were and how exactly they would be able to modify it, and do simulations where you say, okay, you confirm this order, and the system brings you back this date. What do you do, etc. And you just fill the fields yourself, but at least you have the flow in Odoo already show to the customers without having all the lines of code already implemented. Yeah?
Can I turn this export from the App Store, App Studio, into a Python project and then extend it?
Sorry?
If I make this application with Odoo Studio, can I then, after that, work on it, generate the code, and then work on top of that?
So that's a sort of technical question. The thing is, what you get here as an export is an XML file. So all the views and fields are in XML, and it's really likely that your developer, if you're working on Odoo.sh, for example, he will do everything in Python because it's easier for him. It's way more, etc. So I would say yes, you could. You could develop in XML and add all your fields, etc. But it's really likely that developers would say, I would scrap that and redo it from scratch in Python, because there it's cleaner, and it's really exactly as the source code of Odoo, because the source code is in Python. Yeah.
Do only create studio modules from new versions?
Yeah, so that is, indeed that's, I mean, Studio is an application by itself, so we support indeed and we migrate for enterprise customers the changes they've done. So for example, if you say, I remove the field job position and then you migrate to a new version and your view crashes because this field does not exist anymore, we have a team that takes care of that and that will make sure that your Odoo won't crash when you switch version. So to adapt your customization. Yeah.
What happens to fields that are created and then removed from the view? They stay in the database after being created by Odoo?
So if you create, the first time you create it, it's created so you have the column in your database, right, where you can store information. If you remove it from the view, it doesn't mean the field does not exist anymore. It's just that it's not displayed on the screen, but you could display it somewhere else. But if you go deep down in the backend and delete the field, there you lose the information that's there. But otherwise, if I go back here and I search in my existing fields, you see I've removed the birth date, but the field still exists, right? You still have this one, and this one I did while preparing the talk here. So the fields are still there, even though they're not displayed, they exist in the database.
And if you want to remove them, just to clean the database.
Then you would go in the list of all the fields, look for all the ones that are called Studio, for example, and delete the one that you don't need.
Same thing for the models. If you create a new model.
But which is why usually I would say you work on a duplicated environment so that all the fields that you don't need, you don't have to spend time deleting them. You just let them there and we'll never add them to the live environment. Yeah, any other question or? Yeah.
Is it true that Studio is now also going to be available in the Community Edition?
This I really can't say because I don't really have a word in that. It's worth asking the question at the booth though with the different product owners. I hope so because I think it's an exciting tool, but I don't have the answer. Yeah.
Can you create a new module from scratch with the tools?
Yeah. So basically that's what we're going to do on Friday morning during an hour. We will create a new application, so sort of like you have CRM, create the models, the fields, the views, all the flows, etc., until we have an application that is usable for a real usage in this business case. So building everything with Studio. So for a business that is not supported at all, where you want to be able to store all this information, etc., you do everything with Studio. So you go in here, Studio mode, and you see you can create a new app. So you start from there and you build your app fields by fields, view by view, etc. until you have something that works and you want to, for example, export to another environment where people will be able to test it, etc., for example. Yeah?
Two questions, please.
Yeah.
One is searching existing fields.
Uh-huh.
Is that available new feature?
That's new in version 13. Yeah, that's really cool, and that's new in version 13, so you don't have to search with Control F, or it's just you have this new tool now to search, indeed.
If I export the views, say, instead of exporting the module, then because you cannot export the module from existing application, when you do changes in CRM, let's say, then you want to export it and import it into the production database, you cannot do this. Can you do this in the view?
Yeah, so basically you have the standard CRM view, and what you do is not directly write on it, because you never touch the standard code. What you do is making a view that comes afterwards, and then tells Odoo, well, remember, for example, this specific field. Let's say here, you say, remember this specific field, I want to hide it. And so you have another view, a studio view that says, this field I hide it, this one I add, etc. So your change is done in the studio view. You don't need to migrate the CRM view because the CRM view will be the same. You stay with the standard one. So when you export the module, all you get is this customization you've done with Studio. So not the rest because you don't even need it. Normally it shouldn't move.
With export, I can select also existing modules.
No, with export you get everything done by Studio, which means you get all the changes you've done in all apps, and you don't need you need nothing more actually, because the standard view didn't change, so you don't need to migrate it. It's the same in any database, because Studio never touches the view itself. It creates sort of a view that comes afterwards and then makes your changes. Yeah?
And just in addition, when I export all the changes at once, so maybe I'm doing prototyping in the same version in 10 applications, and then I export everything at once and to import it again, but only the changes I did for a specific app. I might need to delete them from the zip file before importing them, or
it becomes a bit technical, but indeed, in those cases, what I would do is go into the code of this zip file, and you just, for example, keep only what talks about CRM, for example, so that when you import a module, it's still installable, and it's only with those changes, and not all the things you could have done in other applications that are not validated, for example. Indeed. Actually, the import with Studio is you have to see it as importing any other kind of data, right? When you import new customers, it's the same as importing new customization, sort of. So you can do in different phases, in different batches, phase by phase, etc. Any other question?
Yes. Importing, for example, from customization done on Odoo 12 to Odoo 13, there may be some issues, of course.
Technically speaking, it happens, of course, because the standard view changes and we need to make some fix. But as I said, if you're on the SaaS platform with the enterprise license, for example, we migrate this straight away when we migrate your code. Because you know, for example, that we already know that all fields, for example, all customization done on this will crash because we remove this field, for example, from a version to another. So in this migration script, we include a change to make sure that you don't have a crash, and we do it for you. All right, if you have any other question, don't forget we have a talk on that on Friday, and you can always come to the booth. I'll let you go have a drink and enjoy your night. Thank you very much. Studio, mon gars, c'est